bitches! Fuck! Hey you guys, and welcome to another episode of Jet Adventures. Now today, we're going to be reviewing the movie Blair Witch, which was a sequel to the Blair Witch Project, which came out in 1999. Now Blair Witch was a movie that was directed by Adam Wingard, who's done movies like The Guest, You're Next. He did a short, which might or might not still be on Netflix, called ABCs of Death. His particular one was Q is for Quack. It's real trippy. If you get the chance, you should check it out. So the sequel to Blair Witch Project actually wasn't even always titled Blair Witch. For a long time, it was titled The Woods. And everyone thought it was going to be this, strange new movie. Maybe it was going to be a little Blair Witch-esque because it's in the woods and paranormal things happen. However, at Comic-Con, it was released that the movie that was going to be coming out was actually titled Blair Witch. And people who had seen it were raving about it, and so we've had a lot of expectations as to what this could be. I know I was pretty excited by the trailer, however I didn't like too many of the elements that they had going on inside the trailer. Most of them were kind of assuaged in the actual movie itself. And so this sequel is actually about James, who was the younger brother of Heather, who was the main character in the original Blair Witch movie. Now James is going out into the woods because he saw a video on YouTube and has been convinced by the guy who had the video that he knows where the house is. And so they go out into the woods and crazy shit ensues. So I won't go into any further detail as to what happens in the movie, but what I will say is that they make a few pretty curious decisions with how they decided to go about shooting the rest of the movie. For example, the shaky cam technique was actually a little bit better. It wasn't as much shaky cam as we had in the original or even the shaky cam movies that have come after it. And so that part I really did wind up liking about it. Some of the shots were a little bit useless. I felt like they were cutting to too many different places that didn't even really matter, and honestly just kind of took me away from the narrative for me personally. And one problem I had with it was the inhuman decisions that some of the people were making. Like when they came to a certain problem in the story and they decided to go a certain direction when I felt like any normal person would have decided to go a different way. And you get the sense that they made these decisions to drive the story forward. However, I personally don't really agree with that. In my eyes, there's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief when it comes to horror movies. But the less human decisions are made, the more it feels like a movie and less like this crazy thing that wound up happening in the woods. You give in to the story, you give in to the idea that there's some supernatural things happening, but you don't really give in too much, or at the very least it took me out of it whenever these people were making these types of decisions. But with that put aside, I felt like it got stronger as it got closer towards the ending. It built up the intensity, and the atmosphere got a little more tense as the story went on, and overall it just ramped up even better and better and better until the ending. And the actors, I feel like, give a pretty strong performance in terms of how they interact with each other and the atmosphere, and as things get a little weirder and weirder, they start to give in to that, and you can really tell that some of their decisions aren't even really their own. And that makes for a really interesting couple of scenes towards the end of the movie. Now I will say that one part that I did miss, and this is going to come off a little odd because this seems like it can't happen, but I felt like the woods played less of a factor in it. I felt like that they weren't really in their environment as much as they were in a different plane. And one of the reasons why I feel like the middle scenes were kind of weaker than the ending was because they were trying to set up some atmosphere, and they really didn't earn some of the legitimate freakouts that these people were having. They were making goofy decisions as things were getting stranger, and that just led to, it pushed the story along, but it really wasn't like very scary. And that part was weak, but it started to ramp up in intensity, and at the end, when the final last quarter of the movie gets really tight and intense and even a bit claustrophobic at times. I know you've seen that one shot where she's crawling through the tunnel, and even when I saw it in the trailer, it freaked me out because you're in such a tight spot and you can barely move your arms and crawling through that hole, and it just must feel like you're going crazy. But the way they got to that point was pretty interesting, barring the middle scenes. And so that's pretty much all I have. What I will say is they had like 1 or 2 more questions talked about. You never really learn why the person was pulling something out of their leg. That was just kind of a thing that happened. And then you went on with the story. So it just kind of seemed like out of nowhere and placeless for me. But like I said, strong characters really let the movie drive through and took me to the point where I was invested enough that I cared about the way it ended. And it was very intense. And you know, while I'm not very scared of movies at times, I think they got me on this one. I think they got me towards the end, and I was like, woo! Woo! And I couldn't help myself. It was a pretty good setup, and at the very end you feel almost a bit satisfied at the ending. I kind of like the way they end those movies sometimes because it feels like, yeah. But like I said, you know, okay beginning, weaker middle, very strong ending. All coming together for what I think is probably a 7.3. And with all that said, go out and try to see the movie if you can. Let me know what you thought. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did it suck? Were you not scared the whole time? Did you poop your pants and have to leave the theater? Or was it a mixture of both poop and non-scariness? Tell me what you thought. Like, comment, subscribe, dislike, whatever you feel like doing. And I'll catch you on the next Jet Adventures.